This is Randy from BibleBuyingGuide.com, and this is part 5 of me choosing my preaching Bible. And in this part, I'm looking at text-only editions. And what this has brought up is a point about, well, font size and also layout. So I looked at several different layout styles, several different font size styles and all this. I'm still not really settled on exactly what font size that I need. Still looking through that. One thing I have settled on, I want opaque paper and I want a dark font. I can read a small dark font on opaque paper better than I can a large font that's not quite as dark and is not on opaque paper. So paper opacity is my number one. The next is a nice design font, a nice clean font. And so just looking at a few things here. In this example, I just happened to have brought up the New Cambridge Paragraph Bible and the Trinitarian Bible Society, Windsor. Now, as we go through the Windsor, first of all, I love both these Bibles. But as you go through the Windsor, you see that it's a text-only edition, and it's just verse by verse. It's around a 9-point font in that range. It's a little bit light, a little bit lighter than I want it to be, but I do like it. I love the paper, nice paper. This one is a paragraph setting, and one thing I like about the paragraph setting in this one is that letters look like letters, quotes look like quotes, because it uses quotation marks. Poetry looks like poetry. Letters are indented. So, and just, it's a nice looking Bible. This one has around 14 words per line in that range. 14 words across. The font is about an 8-point, nice and dark. And it has a really small superscript verse numbers. I'll zoom in just a little bit, see if you can get an idea of how these two compare. Now, as a reader, I prefer a paragraph edition. The reason is I want letters to look like letters. I want poetry to look like poetry. But I don't necessarily need that for preaching. And here's my train of thought. If you think about purchasing a course online or something along that line, and it gives you a book to read, and it gives you a PowerPoint presentation and several other little bits of material, this is the book that you read. That's the equivalence of this. That would be the book that you read. This would be the equivalence of the PowerPoint presentation. The verse by verse, and the material is in bullets. It's bulleted for you. So this is what you would teach from. This is what you would read to prepare to study for teaching the course or reading the book for the course or something like that. Now, on one hand, I do like paragraph because it keeps things in context. And I've mentioned before about how I like to have the section headings. You know, it points out the different topics and things. And then I like to have the updated words, or I like to have a glossary in the margin because, you know, it shows what the words mean and that sort of thing, for words that have changed meaning and that kind of thing. But the thing is, when you are preaching, you're behind the pulpit and you're doing the preaching, you're presenting, you're giving the presentation. That's not the time to decide what the context is. That's not the time to decide whether this portion of this verse goes with that paragraph, that thought, or this thought. That's not the time to learn what these words mean. All of that is done in your preparation. So this is for the presentation. This is great for preparation. This is great for presentation. Now, I can preach from a wide column. I can preach from paragraph. The thing about this, though, is that if you hit around 14 words across, I start to lose my place. And if I look up and look back down, I have to find the verse all over again. And that can be a little bit distracting when you're trying to give the presentation, when you're trying to preach. With something like this, you can see them easy. There they are. So because of that, I'm leaning toward verse by verse rather than paragraph just for preaching. Also because of that, I'm thinking I'm not going to use the preaching Bible as my one and only everything Bible. If I was using a one and only everything Bible, then I would probably go with something like this, where I would have room to do some writing. This is a clean text to read from and preach from. I can make notes here in the inner margin, and that's a good size for carry. So I would go with that one if it was going to be the only Bible I used. But if I'm going to not use the preaching Bible that I use for everything else, then I'm going to prefer verse by verse for preaching. Now, looking at this one, like I said before, I do love this paper. I love the cream color, but the font is just a little bit too small for me. And if it were darker, then it would probably still be a good choice. But since it's not quite dark enough for my eye, I'm going to set this one aside, even though I love this Bible. Don't get me wrong there. That is a beautiful Bible. I love it. The Cambridge, what they call Emerald or Standard Text Edition, Cambridge used to name their Bibles after gems. That's why you see names like ruby, emerald, and turquoise. Has nothing to do with the color. It's the gem. This is the Standard Text Edition. Beautiful Bible. I love it. It's dark font. It's about a 9-point font. It's easy to preach from. The problem is the paper is not quite opaque enough. So when I was preaching from this one, I preached from every one of these, and when I was preaching from this one, I was noticing the opacity more than some of the other Bibles. In fact, one thing I did notice is that when I was preaching from the Thomas Nelson Preaching Bible, and then went from that preaching Bible to the standard text, the opacity was heightened in my eye. It was more noticeable, stood out to me more. So that also made me think that maybe I need to try different lighting over my pulpit. I had warm bulbs that were fluorescent, and so what I tried was change the bulbs from fluorescent to LED, and I went with cool. And now I've got a little bit of a mixture throughout the church. Some are cool, some are warm. And I tried it again, and then all of the opacity, all of the show through, stood out to me more than normal. So I'm thinking maybe I tried too bright of bulbs. I had 3 75-watt bulbs in the lamp above my pulpit, which is actually a ceiling fan. So maybe I need to try something different. I took another bulb out and looked at them again, and maybe it looks a little better, but that's something I'm working through. But either way, I love this one as a carry Bible. I love it as a preaching Bible. It's just the opacity is not quite what I'm looking for. I want a little bit more opacity. And like I said before, I'm being ultra critical. I really am. And all these are nice Bibles, but I'm being extra critical. Another one that I used was the Local Church Bible Publishers 215. Now this one, looking at it right here under this lighting, I would almost say I would choose this one over this one. It's a clean text. There's nothing to get in the way, no distractions. It's beautiful. I had no trouble with the paper. No problem at all. Mid-30s in GSM. I love the color. I almost like this color better than I like that color. This is almost too bright white for me. I like white, but I don't like bright white. This is almost a bright white. But still, I mean, it's not I would still use this. But when I had this on my pulpit, the text, the fonts, the typeface is almost a little bit not enough contrast. This one has a lot of contrast. It's darker, and it's whiter paper. This one is not quite as much contrast. And I don't know if this was just me. Probably was, but one thing I noticed is that when I would read something like this felt comfortable to read. The pacing of the words as I'm reading, based on me reading it out loud. When I went to this one, the pacing was different. And that's happened to me before with this very same Bible. The pacing feels a little awkward to me, and I would stumble over reading. I would go back to this one and read no problem. I would stumble over reading of this. It could be because I was already used to this and I wasn't used to this. That's very much possible, and then most likely I could get used to this and it wouldn't be a problem. But one thing I did notice was that the opacity does show up a little bit more on the pulpit, and I'm trying to figure out what that lighting issue is. Hopefully I'll get that lighting right, and then all these will look great. But here, this opacity looks fine, but at the church, it does show up a little bit more. It's not bad though, not bad at all. But, and this is a edgeline, calfskin edgeline with synthetic liner. This one is from 2014, so I don't know that they make it with the same paper, but I do love that Bible. But I'm still going to stick with this one because the opacity did look better, and I noticed that the blue, or any color really, verse numbers made these easier to see, made them stand out. This one is the 180, also from local church, and this one is from 2013. So I don't know if the paper's the same. I almost liked preaching from this one more than I did the 215. The thing with this one, though, is that this paper did have a little bit of shine, and it kind of made me want to not read from it. But the opacity is excellent. The darkness of the font is excellent. It feels a little bit tighter than the other one, and that's not always a bad thing. Like you can see here, this one has a lot more white space. But I like the color of this paper. I don't know. I could go with this one. I really could. I could go with the other one too, but the glare on the paper got me. It made me want to just push it aside. Another one that one is actually based on is the Trinitarian Bible Society. My version of it that I'm showing is Trinitarian Bible Society. You can also get it from Cambridge. It's large print text. And large print text is just a text-only edition. And this Bible is gorgeous. I love the look of this Bible. There's a little spider right there. I don't know if you can see that. Go, spider. He's playing around here. He's wanting to play with my Bibles. So this one, paper is easy to turn. Font is dark, really nice. I like the look of it. Super nice, super elegant. The thing is, the opacity was more prominent in this one than it was in this one. And it kind of made me go back to this one. If this was, if any of these were the only Bible I had, I would be happy with them. No problem at all. This one is one of the highest on my list. I love this Bible. Large print text. The paper is easy to turn. Font is easy to read. I love everything about it. It's just really nice. But it's the same price as this one. Exact same price. And for the same price, you get paste down liner here, and you get edge line liner here. Now this one's made in China, where this one is made in either Italy. I think Italy. I'm not sure about the current edition. This one's printed and bound in Italy. And they're about the same price. So for the same price, you get a lot more opacity with this one, and you get a better construction on the cover. So I'm still going to go with this one. If this one had more opaque paper, I would choose it. And the reason is it's cleaner. Also, it's a little smaller. Not a lot, but it's a little bit smaller. And so, it might make a difference to someone. But I love that one. What is this? We have a KJV large print Thinline Bible from Thomas Nelson. They have, let me get that out of the way, they have the same footprint, and one is a lot thinner than the other. Of course, the reason it's thinner is because the paper is thinner, and the font is almost the same. Almost the same. The preaching Bible is darker, but not by a massive amount. This one is dark enough. The large print Thinline is dark enough. It's cleaner because it doesn't have to share space with reference system. It doesn't have to have all the little A's and B's and 1s and 2s in the text to alert you to something that you don't really need to be alerted to when you're preaching. This one is just clean. It's pretty. I almost went to this one. Two things made me not. And first is the opacity of the paper. I'm always going to go back to that paper. I've got to have opaque paper because I'm being picky. And if I'm not being picky, I'd take this in every single day. I love this Bible. You can get it for like $20, $25, something like that. So, I mean, it's excellent. Another thing that I like better about the preaching Bible, the blue does stand out. The blue highlights and the blue verse numbers. This one, the verse numbers are out at the edge. And then you see this little space that almost looks a little bit awkward to me. Where this one, they're indented just to help them stand out better. So because of that, I'm still going to go with the preaching Bible. But this one almost got me. It really did. And I also like the space out here. I like a little bit of margin space. I really do. But I would take that one on any trip. I would not have a problem with that one. This one's red letter also. I promise you it's red letter. There you go. Little bit of red letter. There's some more red. It's not quite as dark as that, but that's not always a bad thing, as long as it's dark enough. And then the last one that I wanted to point to and look at was the regular size edition of the New Cambridge Paragraph Bible. This one, you can still get it from Cambridge. Let me get these out of the way. You can still get this thing from Cambridge. Alright, I'm going to get more books out of it. Alright, move some things around. Now we can see this a little bit better. This one almost got me too. I almost changed to this one. And the reason is because this paper is 40 GSM. The font is large enough. It's dark enough. I love the color. I love this color of this paper better than the color of this paper. It's got that eggshell look that I like. Letters look like letters. Poetry looks like poetry. But like I said now, just because it's poetry doesn't necessarily mean that I'm presenting it any different. And that's a question I'd like to ask you guys. If you're preaching from something that's in a poetic setting, do you approach your presentation of that verse any differently than if it's in a verse by verse, or if it's in prose? There's prose here somewhere, I'm sure. I promise you there's prose. So if you have a setting in prose, do you present this setting, do you present your information about this text any differently than you do your information about this text? What do you think? I haven't noticed that I do. I haven't noticed that I approach the study of it differently, and I haven't noticed that I approach the presentation of it differently. So what do you think? So I don't think that I need to know that it's poetic. And if I do really need to know that, I'm going to have that information in my notes. If it makes a difference to what that verse means, to how you interpret that verse, that information is going to be in my notes. But this one almost did get me, not because of the paragraph, which I'm a paragraph guy. I like single column paragraph. I just don't think you need it for presentation. I think the verse by verse is ideal for presentation, because now we're talking about a PowerPoint. This is the book we read. This is the presentation that we're giving. Now, another thing about presentation, if you're familiar with PowerPoint, you have what is displayed to the viewer. And that might include your bullet points. But if you're on the back end of PowerPoint, you see a section across the bottom of notes. So if you're looking at this as giving a presentation as preaching, as from your Bible, you've got the scriptures in bullet points. And then you can have your notes. And the notes could be like a study Bible. Now, I mentioned last time that I'm not going to use a study Bible, but there are a few study Bibles that I can use. So next time, I'm going to look at some of those study Bibles and see what they are and see why I think I can use them, and then decide what I'm going to do from there. In the meantime, I'm going to put these back on my shelf. Even though I love them for reading, I don't necessarily love them for preaching. You know, if I had, that's what I had to preach from, I would absolutely preach from it, no problem at all. But in the meantime, I'm still preaching from this guy, the Thomas Nelson Preaching Bible. So next, I'm going to look at some study Bibles, and then we're gonna go from there. If you have any questions, just ask. And what are your thoughts? What if you use the Preaching Bible? What do you think about it? And do you use a text-only Bible? If you do use a text-only Bible, do you think that you would rather use something like this? Let us know in the comments. Thanks.